just set up the thing. Okay, so it's 1 o'clock. It's time to kick off. Welcome everyone to Grand Rounds this week. My name is Tom Forden. I'm the chair and organizer of Grand Rounds here. And this week our Grand Round topic is global citizenship. And I'm very pleased to have Lesley Crichton here, who's the local lead for global citizenship, and she's going to tell me what global citizenship is, which I think is the first obstacle here. It's certainly something we hear a lot about. And oftentimes with these things we hear that word, but perhaps not entirely sure what exactly it is. So I'm looking forward to that. She has Lesley is a consultant anaesthetist that I've known for a long time, and she's spent 2 years, I think, in Zambia. And time certainly flies, because we met in the corridor the other day. I did say, "Oh, if you're just back from Zambia," and it's been a while. I think a couple of years since she went. But she met a number of colleagues over there in Zambia, and I'm very pleased to welcome one of her colleagues who's in Zambia right now, and that's Hazel Mumphanse. She's also a consultant anaesthetist and head of the Department of Anaesthesia over in Zambia, and she's going to speak, I think, after you've spoken, Lesley. So thank you very much for everyone for coming, and I'm looking forward to this very much. I think Lesley is hoping this to be one of a number of presentations about global citizenship that we do through the year and into next year. So if this is a topic of great interest to you, then please let me know and we'll try and give you a slot. Okay, enough from me. Thanks very much, Lesley, and to Hazel as well.
Thank you, Tom. I think you're expecting answers to questions I can't answer, but we'll see how it goes. So welcome everyone to hopefully what's the first of a few Global Citizens Tayside themed Grand Rounds talks. And as Tom says, my name's Lesley Crichton. And over, well, every few weeks really, what we're hoping to do is to share some of the fantastic global citizenship work that's already happening in Tayside and that we perhaps just don't know about, with the intention of inspiring people, of showing people that there's other similar work going on in the area already, and perhaps linking up some people that don't already know each other. So my credentials are that, as Tom says, I'm a Tayside consultant anaesthetist, and I'm also lead global citizenship champion for NHS Tayside. And I know what you're all thinking, what the heck does that mean? And hopefully I'm going to address that a little bit later on. I came into global health via 2 years living and working in Zambia, supporting anaesthesia training along with people like Dr. Hazel Mumphanse, who we're going to hear from later as well. And I'm also the electives lead for the ScotGem programme, which is a collaboration between the universities of Dundee and St Andrews. And I come here not by any means as an expert. I'm still very much learning myself, and I'm lucky that I have lots of friends and colleagues who are helping me to learn along the way. So today, we're hoping to talk a bit about what global citizenship means, and to introduce to you Global Citizens Tayside. And then I'm going to talk separately a little bit about my experience in Zambia, and then we're also going to hear the Zambian perspective about international volunteering from Hazel. So, number one, what is global citizenship? It's a term that I've really struggled with as well, and it's interesting when you ask other people, you get lots of different answers. But I found this video, although it's from an education perspective, has really helped me to understand.
Lesley, we can't see it, so you might need to share a separate screen, because all we see is your slide.
You're just seeing a slide still.
Yeah, but if you just tinker around and try and make sure you share your computer audio.
Is that working now?
Yeah, but we can't hear the
How's
sound.
That? Okay. How do I? share my
When you
screen.
share
Do you
the
know?
screen, there's an option, a little box to tick to share the
Okay.
system sound.
Share computer sound. Right, give me a thumbs up if this is working.
The world is becoming one.
That's good.
The challenges we face are diverse, but they concern us all. We need global solutions, but where do we find them? Education teaches us to read, write, and count. That's important, but is it enough? Because individual actions now have a global impact, we have to change the way we think and act. What if education was transformative? What if education encouraged us to care for our world and for those with whom we share it? What if education taught us about peace, protecting our environment, human rights, respect, cultural diversity, justice? What if education gave us the skills we need to answer the big questions of the day, to find solutions to the interconnected challenges of the 21st century? Global citizenship education. It gives us the keys to a just, peaceful, tolerant, and inclusive world.
Okay, let's see if I can get myself back. Like that. Okay, you seeing my PowerPoint again?
Yes, that's great. If you just share, excellent. We're back where we were.
Okay, excellent. So this is what Oxfam says about global citizenship and global citizens. A global citizen is someone who is aware of and understands the wider world and their place in it. They take an active role in their community and work with others to make our planet more equal, fair, and sustainable. And in case anyone was still in any doubt, my pal Dave has very kindly written a book recently, which I think really puts the whole thing in context. And if anybody hasn't already read or got a copy of David Attenborough's latest book, I think it makes it very clear why we all need to think about being global citizens now more than ever. The Scottish Government has taken a few quite big steps as well in trying to embed global citizenship in things like the curriculum for excellence in schools and also into NHS Tayside. And their definition of global citizenship is similar. The concept of global citizenship captures Scotland's understanding of interconnectedness, global solidarity, respect for diversity and passion for addressing injustice, whether encountered in our own nation or around the world. And what I really like about both of these definitions are that they emphasise that there are plenty of injustices happening in our own communities and that the concept of being involved in global citizenship doesn't necessitate jumping on a plane and travelling to fix somewhere else in the world. That there's plenty to look at in our own communities where we live. And that latest description comes from this report, which again was commissioned by the Scottish Government. It's entitled Global Citizenship, but really it's more about international volunteering, which is just one of the small parts of that. And what it describes really well is not only the benefits to individuals from going abroad and volunteering, but also what individuals then bring back to the NHS in Scotland. So it really works on justifying why it's good, not just for individuals, but for the country and the NHS as a whole. And the NHS now in Scotland now has a global citizenship group, and they have set up a network of what they call global citizenship champions throughout all the different health boards in Scotland. And there's a lead champion for each health board, which is what I am now doing. And really anyone who's got any experience in global citizenship can become a champion, and you can have a look on the website about how to register as a champion. But really the lead role is just about disseminating information and linking up people who may or may not be doing similar things in similar areas. And we're lucky enough to have our own group of interested people in Tayside, and you'll recognise some of these faces. So Mary there, who I can see on the screen joining us today, Mary was Leeds champion, and I've taken over from her with some very big shoes to fill just recently. Pete Mossy down there is a professor of dentistry who's done a huge amount of work in Malawi with dentistry, working with Malawians. That's Carolyn Tipton, who is Global Citizenship Lead for the University of Dundee. Neil Merrilee's there, who does a lot of work with international health for the University of Dundee. And that's Tim Smith, who is Sustainability and Healthcare Lead for the University of Dundee. And we also have representation from the Dundee branch of Students for Global Health. I'm really conscious that this is a real medic heavy group, and I'd really love to see a bit more diversity representing different areas. So if anybody who isn't a doctor or a dentist would like to come and join in, please do let us know, although that doesn't mean that other doctors and dentists are banned. So if anybody wants to come and share with us, we've decided really that our main objectives are about sharing and supporting people who are interested in global citizenship. So if anyone would like to share in this forum the work that they're doing, please come and talk to us. But also we have social media feeds up and running, which I'll tell you about at the end, and also a blog on MedBlogs. So on to the next bit. So for the next 10 minutes or so, I want to share with you some of the work that I did in Zambia. And I'm going to do that from my perspective, but also from the perspective of Dr. Hazel Mumphanse, my colleague, who is joining us from Lusaka today. And Hazel, as Tom said, is a consultant paediatric anaesthetist in Lusaka, but is also head of the University of Zambia anaesthesia department, which is a hard-won role, I can tell you, and is just a general trailblazer and wonder woman. So I'm going to share with you some of my developing thoughts about international volunteers working in low-income settings, and these thoughts are for anyone who's been involved in global health work, anyone who'd like to be involved, and anyone who's just a bit uncomfortable about unfairness in the world in general. So this is me and my family in 2017. That's on the driveway waiting for the taxi to come and take us to the airport to catch a flight to Lusaka. And I took a 2-year career break out of my consultant job in anaesthesia, which I was lucky enough to negotiate with my department. And I went to support an existing well set up partnership that had set up anaesthesia training in Zambia. And they were looking for somebody like me to go and fill a vacancy for 2 years. And my role was to supposedly lead and to develop the training programme and to gradually facilitate the handover from it being internationally led to being locally led. So a wee bit of background about Zambia. Most of you will already know this. Zambia is a country that's slap bang in the middle of central southern Africa. It's a lower middle income country. And it's got quite a small population for quite a big area. So the population is approximately 17 million over quite a large area. And the reason that you don't hear a huge amount about Zambia in the press is that it's generally been a very peaceful, relatively politically stable country. This data is a couple of years old now, but this is a little bit of background about anaesthesia and the real human resources for health crisis that's happening in Zambia and in neighbouring countries. So Zambia is split into 10 provinces. The population's there in the black, and you can see that the largest bits of concentration of population are around Lusaka province, which is down there in the south. And up here, the second most populous area is the Copperbelt region in the north of Zambia, which is where all the copper mines are, the clues in the name. And then in these little boxes here, I've put a P and an NP. P stands for physician anaesthetist. So these are anaesthetists that are like an anaesthetist you would recognise here, who have been trained in medicine first. And then in the red, NP stands for non-physician anaesthesia provider. And the very great bulk of anaesthesia in Zambia is given by non-physician anaesthesia providers, who are usually a mixture of clinical officers and nurse anaesthetists who tend to work often rurally, often unsupported, are incredibly experienced and incredibly used to dealing with all sorts in the middle of nowhere. And you can see quite rapidly that although the populous areas are relatively well provided for, once you go out into the much more rural areas, they're really nowhere near enough in the way of anaesthesia providers for the populations that live there. And just a quick bit of context about how Zambia is doing on a global scale. As usual, data is fairly scarce, but the type of indicators that we tend to use are things like under 5 mortality rate and neonatal mortality rate. And you can see quite quickly that compared to Europe, Zambia is about 10-fold higher in terms of under 5 mortality and neonatal mortality, but that compared to an average for sub-Saharan Africa, they're doing a bit better. So what did I do while I was there? Well, a huge mixture of things. I did a lot of teaching in theatre and a lot of teaching in the classroom, but I was also involved in working towards developing the specialty as a whole in Zambia and developing the educational governance. So I did a lot of planning for the future in terms of governance, in terms of advocating for anaesthesia on a country scale, talking to politicians, lots of faculty development, hundreds of different things. And here are some of my colleagues that I worked with. You can see Hazel there at the front. And when I look at these people now, I think, what, as an outsider coming in, what was I actually contributing to this group of already incredibly skilled people? Was it my anaesthesia skills? Well, maybe, but so Hazel there, Hazel's a better paediatric anaesthetist than I'll ever be. Who else? Angel Perry there, he's the lead obstetric anaesthetist in the hospital in Lusaka, and he has dealt with more obstetric disasters than I'll ever see in my career. And what these people have that I have much less of is an understanding of the culture and the context in which they work. So I'm not sure I was contributing anaesthesia skills to this group of people. Was it my teaching skills? Well, again, maybe, but these people have all taught throughout their careers. This gentleman here, this is Lupia Kimena, he's a singer, so he's got the most amazing voice, and he can command a room to teach students and peers far better than I ever could. This is Imran Ahmed here, and he's much more quietly spoken, but he can do simulation teaching with some pretty basic kit. What do we call it? Low-tech simulation, and is very good at small group teaching. So I'm not totally sure that I brought anything extra there either. Was it my organisational skills? Well, maybe. I certainly had more time to organise things than any of these guys did, because they were all so consumed with clinical work that they had little time to work out teaching rotas and decide who was going to be filling what slot. Was it my access to funding and expertise? Well, maybe, because of the way the world is set up, and maybe I had a bit more time to think about all of these things than anybody else did. But I think sometimes what we think we're going to contribute as an international person is different from what local professionals want us to contribute. And I think we all go into these types of things, you know, with really good intentions from an excellent place, but there's increasing discomfort, particularly from people within sub-Saharan Africa, about foreign intervention and even about white saviorism. And I think that this gentleman, Madhu Pai, who's a professor in global health in Canada, illustrates this really well by turning it completely on its head. And I'm not going to read this to you, but you can have a read through this description of imagining a couple of people from a low middle income country coming to the USA and for a couple of weeks and intervening. It's really interesting to think about it when you turn it round and hold a mirror up to ourselves. And some of you will have heard about Renee Batch, whose story is attracting a lot of interest in sub-Saharan Africa at the moment. She was a missionary from the US who opened a facility in Uganda for malnourished children and babies. And despite having no medical training or nursing background, walked around with a stethoscope, and as you can see, performed quite complicated procedures on babies. And now a group of bereaved Ugandan mothers have taken her to court, claiming that she was responsible for the deaths of many children. So this sort of thing is getting much more publicity now, particularly amongst middle classes and people who are on social media. So I wonder, is it possible to take more than we give, or even to cause unintended harm? When I think about what I gained from working in Zambia for 2 years, I gained so many things. I learned to persuade politicians to do what I wanted them to do. I learned to be incredibly resourceful, to write national guidelines. I learned about conflict resolution, supporting doctors in difficulty, supervising dissertations. It opened so many doors for me and gave me so many opportunities, but I undoubtedly also caused harm. And the example that always makes me shudder a bit is that Hazel will remember the time that I got her into a huge amount of trouble and also almost got her sacked or moved to a rural hospital for saying something completely politically inappropriate in the Ministry of Health one day. And I've certainly also caused harm by not understanding the context and the culture properly, and by making things work more slowly because I didn't go through the right hierarchical process in order to get something done. But what did Zambia gain from me? I think that's much harder to measure. Funders like short-term measurable things like the number of QI projects I drove, the number of students who graduated while I was supervising them, the number of dissertations I supervised, the amount of good feedback that I got from a course. But when I think about what I achieved that actually made a long-term difference, I think about this woman and I think about the one-to-one work that we did, the strategies that we worked on, the educational governance things that we worked on, the advocating for anaesthesia that we did and we still do. And I think that the impact of my time there is more likely to be seen in about 10 years' time, when the people that I worked with and supported and we mentored each other, they're the ones who are making the political and the strategic decisions. So back to taking more than we give. This is entirely from my brain. This is not an official diagram, but this is how I imagine people, the stages that people go through when they go from a high income setting to volunteer in a low income setting. So after the sort of preparation excitement phase is the why don't you just phase. I don't know if anyone can identify with this, but I've seen countless volunteers come into Zambia, and I've been through all of these stages certainly myself. Here are some examples of what I mean by the why don't you just phase. And I'll leave you to guess which one of these was me, more than one. I'll just go and have a word with the lab and sort out the delays in processing the blood results. Why don't we just dial into remote tutorials via Skype? Why can't we just ask management for some money to do up this classroom? Why doesn't the Ministry of Health just send more doctors into anaesthesia training? Why can't the local anaesthetists just run more of their own tutorials? I've introduced some sharps trays to stop people leaving used needles lying around and put up some posters. And I think after that why don't you just phase, where your why don't you just projects just don't work, then comes frustration. And then the dawning realisation that actually things are much more complicated than that. And that if these problems were simple to address, then the people that work there all the time would have sorted it out a long time ago. And I still remember Naomi Shamambo, who's another one of my colleagues, coming in from ICU furious one day because somebody had, I think it was the example of the U's and E's, had phoned the lab to try and sort out the blood results, and saying, if this had been an easy thing to sort, I would have done this 20 years ago. And I think that after that dawning realisation comes the meaningful partnership and change bit, and that stuff's much more slow burn and much less easy to demonstrate success in, if you know what I mean. But I think that why don't you just phase is unavoidable. I think it's inevitable, and I certainly went through it. And I almost wonder if it's should be the only objective of a first visit to a low middle income country, is getting through that phase and then not transition through that phase. So for example, the Scotland-Malawi partnership runs some really excellent culture and language workshops, and I think understanding of culture can really avoid getting into some bother at later stages, and it's good manners to at least try to understand culture and language before you go to a new country. And also our very own University of Dundee has some very good ethics and culture modules that students do before they go to lower resource settings to do their placements. So anyway, enough about me. I'm going to hand you over to Dr. Hazel Mumphanse now, because you've heard my perspective. So we're going to hear a little bit of a Zambian's perspective on international volunteering from Lusaka. Are you there, Hazel? I'll stop sharing.
Good afternoon, everybody. And Lesley, thank you so much for inviting me to this meeting. I must say, I was laughing when Lesley was showing some of the things in her "why don't you just" phase. And it's not only once that this lady has almost got me fired. She also got me fired another time when she suggested that I be made the head of department and usurp the actual head of department. So I would have moved into her house. So really, Lesley asked me to talk about, to give a perspective of what I think about volunteers that come through to Zambia, essentially looking at some of the good things, looking at the things that are not so good, and also just trying to discuss some of the things that maybe I would like to see a little bit more of. And I won't share a screen, but I'd like to just turn off my screen a little bit just so that I can improve on my bandwidth. So to start with, I think I should say that partnerships are a good thing, and that they're actually not very easy. So I've been involved in a program where we've had partners from the onset, and I think it's taken quite a bit of time, like over several years, to sort of get it to really gel together, work together, understand each other, and also really understand different perspectives. And so maybe just to start with some of the good things that come with volunteering, I think one of the things is, one of the good points is that there's always a different perspective. I think when you're working in a particular area for so long, what happens is that you lose sight of how you could do things differently. And so I think what tends to happen is that when somebody comes in with new ideas, fresh ideas, you also really can look at something from a different perspective and in a way that is helpful. I think the other thing is quality improvement. So when you're used to doing something, something in one particular way, sometimes you really lose the essence of how something can be done in a quality manner. And what I've learned along the way is that there can always be improvement in the quality of things that you're doing. And this is what volunteers can bring to the table. They bring something that they've been doing in a particular manner and realize that you can actually raise the standard to that. Even though you don't have much resources, there's really always a way of trying to improve a standard of something, trying to improve quality of something. I think not only is it really about bringing new ideas, but it's also and new standards, but it's really also about refreshing standards that we may already know of, but because of it can be quite frustrating. You're used to really improvising, taking shortcuts, and you may feel like over time you begin to act in that manner. But when a new person comes in with a different perspective, they really can refresh standards. And I think that's always important, and to continue working in a particular manner. The other thing is manpower, and I know the issue of manpower can be a problem, especially for somebody who's volunteering, because when somebody is coming, say from Scotland, they have a particular perspective of what they're going to do. I think I'm just guessing. When I get to Zambia, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to be involved in this, be involved in that, and things like that. But when they get to a place where they're going, you sort of understand that this place may actually have different priorities. And for me, one of the priority areas has probably always been a shortage of hands. And so you'll find that with volunteers coming on board, there's always the helpful impact of just having those extra hands, having an extra head in the room, having somebody to talk to, somebody to share and bounce off ideas. And it may not only be in the clinical area, but it could be things that are non-clinical. So with the partnerships that have been going on here in Zambia, usually when we've tried to do audits and things like that, usually we've never had the hands or the time to actually, you know, do everything to good quality. And what volunteers have really helped with is to bring that dimension of having extra hands, extra manpower, the legwork to actually make some of that happen. I think the other thing is really, I would say, supporting systems by matching the systems that exist in their countries of origin. So there are certain systems that really could just do better by being partnered with another system that works much better. And I think that this is one of the good things that you know, volunteering and global citizenship just helps with. And the other thing is building relationships. I think building relationships for me, it speaks a lot to me in that, of course, there's always the issue of numbers. When somebody has come through, what is the output? It's usually numeric, and you can't really put a figure to relationships that are created and really what can grow out of those relationships. And of course, these are some of them are short-term visits, so there's really no way that somebody could create a relationship. But I think that each and every contact should actually be a point of developing a relationship going forwards, because in my own opinion, I think that that's where the real change begins. The other good thing I think is it's also dependent on the person who has traveled and come through to a setting like ours. I think it would depend on the expertise, and it also depends on the skills, and it really depends on what, you know, they are willing to lay down on the line. I think Lesley was really willing to lay down a lot on the line for her to come here, and just for some of the things that you know, she wanted to develop. And I think, I'm not sure what she really wanted to achieve, but I think for me, she ended up being somebody who was a teacher, somebody who was a mentor, somebody who helped to grow a lot of different things, really just by growing the relationship that she had with me and other people. Because what we did then, we were able to actually help to grow other people. So really the growth does not end with that one or two people that the volunteer has, but it develops and goes forward towards other people. So I think, again, that's the good thing that I could say about partnerships. Maybe just going to the things that are not so good about volunteering that I thought I would bring about. Actually, before I bring that about, I think the other thing I would say is that it's really a two-way learning. And I must say that even the volunteers are able to get something out of the places that they visited. So I think professional development is one of them. Resilience, things such as friendship, I think those are also things that go both ways. So I would say that those are all good things. And maybe they take back a few things that they could have learned here to really go and impact the places where they're working from. So coming to the things that I feel that may not be too good, sometimes there could be a judgmental tone coming from some of our volunteers. So I think there's just certain things that really can burn bridges from the beginning. And so I think probably having an open mind, both ways, not just from the person who is coming into the country, but for us who are also here, I think it's always good to be open-minded. So it could be that we are judging each other, and I think from the onset, that is something that we should really have a mindset not to have. And then there's also the idea of taking a hard line. And I think taking a hard line really without weighing what the options are, you know, sometimes there is no option, and you would find that somebody has to make a decision. If they could make a decision in a different manner, probably they would. At times they have no option, and usually you would find that with partners and volunteers, sometimes they may take a hard line and not see it as something being well done, really by looking at it from a theoretical perspective rather than a practical perspective. And I again tend to think that this sort of hard line also tends to really burn bridges early. And because people are not around for too long, you find that actually those bridges may actually be difficult to rebuild in a short period of time. The other thing I thought of was the idea of not fighting well. I think we're all going to fight at some point. Lesley, did we fight a lot? I can't remember. But you'll find that we will fight quite a bit. We'll disagree on things, but I think we all have to learn to fight well so that we may be able to move on from those fights and think of the bigger picture. I think the other thing that I took down that is not a very good thing is taking over rather than supporting. I think when that happens, you sort of tend to feel like you're not really sharing in a vision, but each has a way of doing their own things. And what tends to happen with this sort of thing is if you don't have a shared vision, then you'll find that you may be trying to get to the same place, but you get there longer, or you just don't get there because the efforts are not marrying with each other. As I said, I think the idea of thinking that whatever is being done is unilateral is also detrimental. I think there should be an understanding that whatever it is we're doing is really bilateral, involving ourselves and involving the other persons. So that's something that should always happen. And I think for this to happen, it has to be inclusive. When there's non-inclusion of just certain, for instance, say heads of departments or heads of institutions, ministries of health and things like that, I think even that can derail a process that when you started it was meant to be fruitful. Lastly, I think the thing that I think hasn't worked so well from my own perspective is a change in the different stakeholders. And with that coming in, usually the things that are priority also change. And when that happens, I think it becomes difficult for new people who are coming in, or even old people who had a particular vision, and then newer people coming in with different priorities. I think it really tends to unsettle the sort of partnership and progress that was initially made or planned to be made. So for instance, let's say a change in government. So one government thinks in a particular way, a new government comes in and they just don't prioritize that initial thing. You'd find that even as a volunteer, you may find it difficult to actually go and get, to go and develop an already existing partnership because, priorities have changed, as have done the stakeholders. So I think those were the few things that I thought perhaps may be the downside, but what I would really like to see more of, and I can't really put it in too many words, I would just say that it's really development of relationships. The things that are harder to measure, I think are at the end of the day, the things that really last longer. And the effect of those are more protracted than really just a 2-week stint I did. I'm not saying that if somebody came in for 2 weeks, for instance, and did some surgeries for 2 weeks, that has an impact. But I'm just thinking that I would like to see more of longer lasting relationships. I think in that way, you are really able to get more out of it because the discussion continues, the ideas continue, the shared vision continues for longer and beyond that 2 weeks. And so thank you very much. I think that's all I had prepared for this short talk.
Thank you so much, Hazel. I think it's absolutely essential that your perspective comes through in all of this as well. And really that's all that I had to say. Let me just share my slides back up again. I hope that we haven't created more questions than we have answers today. But really just to say that I think there's a huge amount of work that goes on in Tayside, and I really hope that some of you feel that you would be happy to come and share it with everybody else. And there are lots of different ways that we can do that. If people want to come and talk on this platform, then that would be fantastic. And I think the Zoom, although things have changed a lot with COVID, the Zoom platform really does open up accessibility. And I've just been flicking through, as Hazel's been talking there, notice that there are at least 2 other people from Lusaka that are on this call at the moment. So just making things accessible to other people is fantastic. We have now a Global Citizens Tayside Facebook and Twitter feed, and also those of you who have either an NHS Tayside or a University of Dundee login can go onto MedBlogs and look at the blog that we have over there as well. So please do come and get involved if you have something to share or you're interested. And before Tom takes any questions, I just want to make a final plug. There's a fundraiser going on at the moment for raising money to support anaesthesia in Zambia. And I'm going to leave that QR code up, but if you hold your phone camera up to that QR code, it will take you to a Just Giving fundraising page. And if anyone feels that they would like to donate a little bit of money, which will go directly towards supporting anaesthesia in Zambia, that would be most welcome. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Lesley, and particularly to Hazel for dialing in from Lusaka. I found that absolutely fascinating. Thank you very much. My personal experience of this sort of thing, it's a long time ago. I spent 4 months in Southwest Uganda in 1997, so a long time ago, and was felt much of what Hazel spoke about there, of just a very short space of time and just sort of dropping in and dropping out. And I think I did some good, but there was no long-lasting relationship, and it didn't. But that working together never really quite happened for me. And what I found very interesting and warming is that you clearly have developed that long-lasting relationship, and you're here a year down the line still working together collaboratively. And I think you probably, in fact, definitely underestimate your impact, Lesley, that you've left back in Lusaka. I'm sure Hazel would say the same. I think you all brought a huge amount to their department and them to you. So there are a couple of questions. John Dowell has asked a question. John, do you want to just talk and turn your camera on, etc.? Don't be shy. Maybe he's shy. Okay, we'll take it that he's too shy. So he says, thanks, I salute your perspective and also setting realistic aims for learning for IH experiences. It's quite a challenge to seek that level of analysis and reflection within a short attachment, especially with a tight focus of clinical areas. Now the question, Lesley, is do you have any thoughts you could share on how this might be addressed within medical and dental and nursing electives? So shorter period of time, what's your advice to people going on electives to lower middle income areas, how to get the most out of things? Perhaps Hazel might have a view as well, actually.
Yeah, well, Hazel might like to address that first of all. John, this feels like my interview for my job all over again.
I do apologise, I now got my mouse to cross onto the right screen so I could unmute. No, it's an invitation to explore this area, which, as you know, fascinates me, and I'm very interested to hear if Hazel's experiences have given her any ideas about how this curious trade that seems to happen with young medical and dental learners in particular can be made to work better.
Thanks, John. I didn't really hear the last part about the young medics, but looking at what you asked, I think it's not very easy probably to create longer lasting relationships when you're just around for a short period. But I think one of the things that we tried to do was to sort of create these I would say I think maybe like a buddy system. So before people travel somewhere, they, maybe try and get an understanding of the people who are there, perhaps who are they, what do they do, and then, matching them with the people who are coming out for that 1 or 2 week period. I think that might be helpful in sort of, trying to Because when you come in, it's a new area, you don't know anybody, you're meeting new people for the first time, and then, you know, you're suddenly put together to work together. I think maybe what might be helpful is also just trying to get to know each other before the visit, and maybe also deliberately doing things together during that short visit and post that visit, because you never know, it may not be your last visit. I think that's what I would say.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with that. And the best examples I've seen are if short visits can be part of a greater partnership. So there's an ongoing partnership which exists between two different places, and then the shorter visits can be coordinated in a way that means that they're introduced beforehand. There's some cultural preparation is available, so that the preparation starts before the placement happens. And I think the other thing that I've found has worked really well, or that we have within our partnership. So for example, we would have sometimes maybe students or quite junior trainees that would be interested in coming for a couple of weeks, is to make sure that the objectives were set beforehand, so that they were very specific objectives, so that people weren't having to assimilate, you know, a new culture, work out where they were and who they were working with, and then think of something to do, that they were giving something very specific to do. But I think behind it all, there needs to be an ongoing partnership relationship between two places.
I think that sort of long-term relationship thing, it really is key. Even in this last 6 months, and I've managed to get 53 minutes into this without saying COVID, but here we go. During COVID times, I've been linked with some with other places around the world to try to help with their COVID response, from basic things through to CPAP and ICU, etc. But I've spoken to people in Uganda, I've spoken to people in Iraq, and I've spoken to people on Orkney. So I think it just shows you that what you were talking earlier about the globalness of it all, is that it's not just Africa, and it's not just, you know, we can have these relationships with places that where there's a symbiotic relationship as close as just over the water in Orkney, and those relationships are really, really valuable. I think we've got an awful lot to learn from each other. Has anybody else got any questions? Any comments they'd like to make? So Lesley, I think we're going to try and pull together another slot for you to talk later on in this semester, and hopefully there'll be people who want to volunteer to join in with that. Next week at Grand Rounds, you'll be aware that it's Black History Month in October, and the university is taking part in that they've hosted a number of talks which are specifically around Black history, and we've been asked at Grand Rounds to take part in that. So the next two talks will be dedicated to topics which hopefully will be of interest to people. In 2 weeks' time, one of our consultant obstetricians is going to speak about the obstetric complications which are more common in people from a Black and minority ethnic background, and the inequalities that lie in obstetric care. And next week, I'm turning to my own department, so in respiratory medicine, we're going to talk to you about mainly really just to start a discussion about the inequalities and differences in respiratory care between Black and minority ethnic people, and just look through some of the evidence to see what actually is cultural differences and what may be more specific to Black and minority ethnic people. So that's next week. We're going to be talking about respiratory complications. The following week, obstetrics, and I can't remember what's in the week after that, but I'm sure it'll be fascinating. So I'd like to thank Lesley again for putting this together. Thanks to Hazel for her perspective. Really appreciate that. And if you want to dial into future Grand Rounds, please do. I'm sure Lesley will forward you on the emails. And thanks to everyone else for joining in. And I will see you again next week. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.